All right, Abby, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Cool. Am I ready to go?
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I couldn't hear your intro, but I'm sure you said real nice things about me and Bloomerang. So I'll just return the favor. Thanks for having me. We love QGive. They're awesome. You should definitely check them out and use them because they can really help you. So I am over at Bloomerang. I basically do this kind of thing at Bloomerang, so I love it. I have my own webinar series on Thursday afternoons also. So check that out, and pretty involved with some research studies into donor retention, which I'm going to talk about today. So year end. So we're recording this on November 14th. It's probably a little too late to do a lot of the kind of traditional year end things. I'm sure all of you listening, you probably already got, your campaign in the mail. Maybe it's already hitting some mailboxes, but there are still some things you can do in the next 45 days or so to make year end even more successful than if you didn't do those things. But we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what you should be doing in January specifically with all of those year-end donors. I'm sure you're all going to have a really successful year-end. You're going to get a lot of donations. You're going to get new donors. We're going to talk about what you should be doing with those folks kind of in that first 30 to 90 days of 2020. But like I said, I do have some quick tips for you, some things you can maybe even do today to help the year-end fundraising before the end of the year. Just some quick fixes and tips there that you can put into practice. But let's start off with what I think is the most important thing, and that is retention. My goal for all of you today is to give you some ideas of how you can retain all of these year-end donors in 2020. I don't want you to just have a really good year end in terms of fundraising, only for those people to never give to you again in 2020. That in some cases can be actually worse than if you didn't get those donations in the next 45 days or so. And I'll kind of explain how that works in terms of the math here in a second. But I want to give you just a real crash course in donor retention because I think it will not only guide your donor communications and acknowledgement efforts, but it can also kind of guide how you ask for money and actually how you generate those donations to begin with. If you're not well versed or familiar with the most recent donor retention data, I think the best place to get that is FEP, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. Really cool collaboration between AFP and the Urban Institute, and they study donor retention every single year. They crunch a ton of data from the leading database providers, Bloomerang being one of them. We contribute data to them, and every year they release a report, and they've been doing that since 2006. And we've got the 2019 data. This is looking at the 2018 calendar year. So in a few months, we'll have the 2019 data in the 2020 report. But as you'll see in the next couple of slides, from year to year, the retention data doesn't really change that much. It doesn't fluctuate too much. It's more kind of where we're at over kind of a decade average. But the average donor retention rate is only about 43%. So all of the people that you are going to get as a donor in 2019, a little less than half of those people, if you're, an average nonprofit like these folks are going to give to you again in 2020. So it's really important that you do some of the things I'm going to recommend to you over the next hour or so that you can get a better number than 43%. It's absolutely possible that you can get into the 50s, the 60s, even the 70s. I actually had a Bloomerang customer tweet me this morning. If you look at my feed, you'll see my response. But yeah, a retention rate in the high 60s, which is awesome because it's so much higher than the average. So only about 43% of people who donate to you from one year come back in the following year and give to you again. But the real dangerous metric here on this slide is that first-time donor retention rate at 20%. So we only retain 20% of first-time donors. So we're going to spend a lot of time on the first-time donor retention side specifically over the next hour or so, because it's probably likely that you're going to get some brand new donors here between now and New Year's Eve, and you definitely want more than 80% of those people or 20% of those people to come back, because if you spend more to acquire that donor than the actual gift they make, if you spend maybe $20 to acquire a $10 donor, you've got negative ROI. And if they don't give to you again, you've lost money on that transaction. So we want to definitely improve that number. And the way you do it is you get a second gift. If you get a second gift, that retention rate goes to 60%. And if you get a monthly commitment, it's above 90%. So we're going to talk a lot about how to get the second gift from new donors that give to you at year end, and how to get more monthly donors, because monthly donations are really kind of the secret formula to donor retention. It's super sticky. Sometimes it's hard to cancel a monthly donation. Maybe it's a little awkward to do it. But once you get a monthly donation, most of those people stick around. And like I said, these numbers really haven't changed year to year very much, pretty much hovering in the low to mid 40s. Even gift retention is about the same. That's the amount of dollars retained from one year to the next, basically low 40s to mid 40s. So the organizations who focus on retention can really stand out from the crowd, because this is kind of the status quo, and most people operate from a very acquisition focused mindset rather than a retention focused mindset. And I'm not saying that you should stop acquiring new donors or stop acquisition efforts by any means. Don't do that, please. But also keep in mind that you want to keep the people that you already have. Not only is that new donor retention number low, but it's been falling over the last 5 years or so. And there's a lot of theories on why this is going on at FEP. My kind of theory, which is totally untested or unproven, just kind of my gut feeling, is that it's easy to become a donor for the first time. You can click the Facebook donate button, you can donate to a peer-to-peer campaign, you can do text to giving. It's that kind of barrier to entry is very low to become a donor. I think the trade-off is that we don't usually give those donors, especially online donors, a very good experience and really kind of show our appreciation to those people. So we're going to talk about ways to do that as well, since this is kind of the high end of the online giving season here coming up in the next month or so. But other metrics pretty much staying the same. That repeat donor retention rate, basically in the low 60s, doesn't really budge. It's kind of like that 2% of GDP, that fundraising typically represents. But one issue that kind of worries us at FEP is the recapture rate. So not only is it very low, only 4%, but like the first time donor retention number, it's been falling steadily over the last 5 years or so. So this is the percentage of people who come back to you after lapsing. Only 4% of those people are going to come back if you do nothing. And I'm going to give you some ideas of what you can do to also bring some of these people back into the fold. But the main takeaway from this slide is, once you lose someone, most of the time they're not going to come back to you. So don't sleep on retention. Not only can it help sort of your bottom line revenue, but once they leave, it can be really, really hard to get that person to come back. One interesting piece of data that is really sort of relevant to the year-end giving season, when so much giving online happens typically, is that the retention rate for online donors is typically lower than the rate for offline donors. So it's usually 5 to 10% difference depending on the age bracket of that donor. But another thing that's interesting about this slide, just as an aside, is we don't really see retention rate differences by age of donor. Sometimes, it seems like millennials and Gen Zs are always kind of getting, teased a little bit, but there's really no data to suggest that a 25-year-old donor is going to be necessarily a lot less loyal than maybe a boomer or someone who's in that older generation. Where we really see the differences in retention is by channel, specifically online versus offline. So I'm going to give you some ideas of how you can improve that online retention rate, since so many of your year-end gifts are going to come through online channels. So stay tuned for that coming up in about a few minutes here. Okay, so why does this matter? Why should you care about retention? You probably thought you were going to get a bunch of acquisition tips. I do have some acquisition stuff for you for sure, but I just want to hammer the point home that even at an average donor retention rate of about 40%, which is a little lower than the average rate here in the States, you basically are starting over from scratch every 5 years. Check out the bottom row of this table. It's a 60% attrition rate, which is a 40% retention rate. It's a little bit below average. But if you start off with 1,000 donors at a 40% retention rate, you're down to 10 donors from that original pool of 1,000 after 5 years. And if you're listening today, if you are involved in major gift fundraising or plan giving, that's your pipeline, that 10 donors. Those are your best prospects. And that's a pretty small pipeline to try to get some larger gifts from. And you can see that if you are at a 60% retention rate, even 80%, it's possible. Really hard to get to, but it is possible. those people stick around for much longer periods of time, meaning that there's more likelihood of bequests and planned gifts, upgrades, monthly donations, volunteerism, all that good stuff. So even at that 40% rate, your list really dwindles down pretty quickly. So we kind of get caught in this like acquisition treadmill, right? Which again, you don't want to stop acquisition, but if you can improve your retention rate by just a few percentage points, it can mean a lot more people sticking around. And not only a lot more people, but a lot more dollars. This is just a quick illustration of the revenue differences between an organization with a 41% retention rate and a 51% retention rate. And you can see the organization at 51%, they're raising about $500,000 more from those retained donors. And not only are they giving more, but maybe they're doing other things. Maybe they're volunteering or serving on a board or a committee, telling other people about you, maybe doing peer-to-peer campaigns. These are good people to maybe give that QGive peer-to-peer campaign stuff to, which is really awesome. So a lot of benefits, I guess, is my point to retaining more people year over year. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to do it for year-end donors specifically? And it doesn't just apply to year-end donors. It really applies to people giving at any time of the year. But we're going to zero in on year-end for sure. So why is this happening? Why do people stop giving? Well, we've got data on that. We've got a great research study from Adrian Sargent. He's kind of the godfather of donor retention. He surveyed a massive list of lapsed donors and got some pretty interesting answers from those lapsed donors. Most of it comes down to, were they thanked? Were they communicated to appropriately? Were they told the difference that their donation makes? Those two things, thanking and telling the donor what their gift is doing out in the world, that equated to almost 20% difference in retention. And if you can change your retention rate by just 20%, that's actually a pretty big jump and can mean a lot for your bottom line revenue for sure. Some of these things are not controllable for sure. Some of those donors passed away. Some of them had financial difficulties. But if you look at those top four, thought the charity didn't need them, didn't know how the donation was being used, didn't even remember being a donor, probably because they never got thanked. There's almost 40% a difference in retention that is totally controllable by us. So those top four bullet points, I would really encourage you to add some of those principles or kind of reverse engineer those concepts into what you do in terms of donor communications, whether it's acquiring a donor, an appeal, a gift acknowledgement. Donors want to be thanked. They want to know what their gift is doing out there in the world through your organization, through the services you provide. Donors really crave that information. So if all you take away from this presentation is we need to make sure we thank year-end donors and really make sure they feel appreciated and tell them throughout 2020 how that gift is making a difference in the world, you're going to be set. You're going to be way ahead of most people that don't focus on those things, that kind of put their feet up at the end of the year and say, well, we did a really good job. We hit our fundraising goal, and and now we're done. We can take a break until the spring appeal season. No, the real work, I think, takes place between January and March, and making sure that all of those donors who gave to you really feel like they made a difference and really feel appreciated. That's just one study. We've got numerous studies that basically say the same thing. If maybe you're saying, okay, that's just one data set, here's another one. This is one that was done 10 years after that Adrian Sargent study, completely different data set. But again, surveying donors. This one actually surveyed long-term donors versus lapsed donors and asked them why they keep giving. And pretty much the reasons are the same. They feel like the organization is effective because they've been communicated to by those organizations of all the great things that the organization is doing through those donations. They get thanked quickly. That was the number 3 reason. The speed of the gift acknowledgement has been shown, not just in this study, but in others, and I'll show those with you here in a second, to be a really big factor in whether or not donors stick around. So not only should we thank donors, but we want to thank them quickly. If someone gives to you on New Year's Eve, they should be thanked really quickly, maybe within the first week of January. Surveying donors, are you asking donors what makes them tick, how they feel about your organization, why they give to you, what's the connection to their cause or to your cause? that was a number 4 reason from these loyal donors that says that, hey, these organizations, they kind of show that they care what I think as a donor, and they ask me those questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about surveying these year-end donors as well. And then the rest kind of repeating the same concepts here. Again, they think the work is important and effective, the organization is effective, they feel appreciated, and they're receiving those stories about what the donation that they gave is doing out there in the world. So maybe you've heard this from other presentations or blog posts or podcasts, but there is a mountain of research that says the best thing you can do for donors is make sure you thank them quickly and authentically and personally, and make sure you're telling those success stories throughout the year. Don't just wait until your annual report or that one big event you do where you tell some patient stories or service recipient stories. Do that on a continuing basis for sure. So we're going to talk about how to do these things after you get those year-end gifts, but I did promise you that I would give you some tips for how you can improve the actual year-end fundraising that you're going to do over the next maybe 30 to 45 days. And like I said, since it's mid-November already, I don't really have a lot of advice to give you in terms of maybe your appeal letter or the campaigns you've got giving out. But since so much giving is going to happen online, especially around Giving Tuesday and especially that last week of the year, in fact, that last week of the year dwarfs Giving Tuesday by quite a bit. I want to make sure that all of you are kind of ready for that traffic that you're going to hopefully get to your online giving pages. So my first bit of advice for you, beyond focusing on retention, is make sure you're ready for that. Make sure that it's easy for those donors to come to your website and give. If you're using QGive, you're fine. They are the masters at all this stuff. If you're a QGive customer, you're probably in really good shape. But if you're not, I think there are still some things that you can do to help that. If you are sending people from your website to a third-party vendor, you might want to consider not doing that and trying to change that up, especially if you already have software that enables that. Sometimes that software just goes unutilized or uncustomized or whatever. Every time that the donor has an extra step to donating, a big chunk of those people falls off because they're not really sure why they're leaving your website. Maybe they don't trust what this page is necessarily. So try not to do that if it's not too late. If you're stuck with that kind of third-party donation page, make sure that at least that page looks really clean and is kind of donor-centric and gives donors a sense of how those donations are going to be used even before they make that donation. But the best thing you can do is have that donation page and form right there on your website. It's only one click away. It's all there on one page, and it's easy for the donor to complete that transaction. And don't weigh that page down with a ton of distracting elements. This is something that's sometimes referred to as the toothpaste trance in web design. It's sometimes tempting to load that page up with a lot of things that can be clicked, scrolling picture carousels and maybe videos. Make sure that basically the only thing they can do on that page is donate to you. Even if you can get rid of that top line navigation, that's good. You don't want people to be able to leave that web page without actually making their donation. So I know this might be a little bit of a heavy lift from the technology side, especially since we're so close to year end, but maybe there's some simple tweaks you can make to make sure that that page is really easy to donate to and doesn't distract users too much, because it's easy to get distracted online, especially when there's a monetary transaction at stake. So don't give those donors really any excuse to leave. If you're set on that, try to maybe take some of those principles from that donor loyalty research and apply them to your online giving pages. I really like it when giving ladders on an online donation page not only suggest gift amounts, but also kind of tell the donor why you're suggesting those gift amounts and what specific impact those gifts will make, rather than just having kind of a generic, $30, $50, $100. I really like that this page gives the donor a sense of what that donation is really going to be going towards. And you're not necessarily locking someone into a fund or a specific gift designation or anything like that. Just kind of giving the potential donor a sense of these are the kinds of things we do. This is the kind of things that your donation might go towards. And it may even help to get people to move from one gift amount to the next higher. I was considering a $50 gift, but gee, a $60 gift will do this much more. So yeah, I'll add that extra $10 in there for sure. So if you don't have this on your donation page, I would suggest that you at least try it and see what kind of difference it makes. And I think you'll find that it gets people thinking about the impact that they're going to make well before they even make that donation, and hopefully improve those conversion rates on your page. Make sure you have that monthly giving option. If you remember from the earlier slide, the retention rates on monthly donors, super high. It's really good to get that right at the outset, even if it's a small amount, $5 a month, $7 a month, even $18 a month. Even a small gift on a 12-hour basis is going to be way higher donor lifetime value than just kind of a one-time gift. So make sure that's an option on your donation pages. And you might even consider adding things that will give the donor a sense that this is a reputable organization, this is a trustworthy website, it's a secure website. If you're into kind of those nonprofit watchdog groups, I know people have a lot of varied opinions on those. I definitely understand that. But if you have a highly rated profile already, if you've already gone through that process and made that investment, you might want to tell donors about that right on their donation site. Make sure that they feel like it's a secure page, that their credit card isn't going to be used in any sort of weird, nefarious ways, and maybe even putting a badge from the vendor so they know that there's some sort of third party there that will secure the donation. So those are maybe some quick changes you can make, but I definitely recommend the giving ladder with the suggested uses for the donation, because so much research is telling us that donors want to know where their dollars are going and want to know how their donations are making a difference in the world. So that covers you pre-gift, but let's talk about post-gift. Post-gift is just as important as getting that donation in the first place, maybe even a little bit more important if you ask me. So often with online gifts, it's very transactional, it's very robotic, it's impersonal. I really think that's why we have about a 10% lower retention rate on the online side as we do offline. And I think the main reason for that is it's not a very human or personal experience in terms of giving to a nonprofit online. So what I want you to do when we get off this call, before you go and grab your lunch, is I want you to donate to yourself. Give yourself about $5 online, go to your employer's website, your nonprofit's website, and look at these 3 things, especially the first 2 things, because you're going to see them right away after you donate. The thank you page, that's the page of your website that you get sent to after donating. You'll kind of get redirected there, or maybe the donation form will disappear and you'll be brought to a new page. And then check your email to see what automatic or receipt email you get from your online giving provider. Maybe it's your donor database, maybe it's your payment processor, whatever you're using. Look at those 2 things specifically and make sure that those are nice, warm, personal gift acknowledgments. They don't have to just be a very transactional receipt or something that makes the donor feel like they just bought a tank of gas from you or a gallon of milk or something like that. Hopefully those can be customized in a way that makes the donor feel good about what they just did. And then I would sort of, audit what it is you're going to do to formally acknowledge that gift. And we're going to talk about that here a little bit later on, but I really want to focus on these top 2 things, the thank you page and the email confirmation, because so often they go uncustomized. We just kind of use the out-of-box template that our online giving provider or our donor database is giving to us, but these things can be customized to do all the great things that research tells us that donors want. It can thank the donor, it can tell the donor what kind of communications they can expect from you coming up in the near future. It can Tell the donor the impact that gift is going to make. Now, of course, you haven't spent that money yet. You've just, you've just received it 2 nanoseconds prior, but you can still kind of tell the donor what they can expect that gift to do over the coming days or so. And then keep the donor engaged. So often the confirmation page and that automatic email don't really keep the donor or give the donor something to do after looking at that page or reading that email. So what I'm talking about here is something like this, where you go to a website, you fill out the donation page, you click donate, you put in your credit card number, you click donate, and then you're sent to this page, which is basically just kind of a placeholder, right? Thanks for your donation, that's all it says. And all the donor really can do after reading that sentence, if they even read it, is close your website. I feel like this page is such a missed opportunity. And I think it is a contributor to why those online donor retention rates are so much lower, is because it just kind of feels like the end, right? It feels very transactional, and it doesn't do the things that research tells us that donors want to hear. Now, sure, it says thank you, but it's kind of rote and very basic, right? And I know it's kind of hard to do something very personal on such an automated page, but I think it could definitely say something like, we can't wait to tell you all the great things your donation is going to do over the next year or so. And it doesn't give the donor something to do next. Check out this recent blog post from our ED, watch this video about someone who was recently impacted by donors like you, a survey, a link to matching gift opportunities. There's so many things you can put on this page, but don't just leave it practically blank. Don't do this. This one's a little bit better. There's some nice donor-centric text here. You've just changed lives. Your investment is already being put to work to do this, this, and this. So that's better. That's definitely better than the previous version. But I think, again, this page suffers from, okay, now what? It doesn't really give the donor something to do next. And that's a bummer, because you've spent so much time and energy and money trying to get them to your site to make a donation. And it doesn't have to be really the end of the conversation here. You don't want them to just close your website and forget about you for a while. I like this one. There's a nice video on the thank you page that kind of takes you on a tour of the organization. So you see the service recipients, you see volunteers, you see employees. They all say thank you into the camera. You get a really good sense of what it is this organization does and what your money is going towards as a donor. So video is a nice way to engage people on these pages. You can probably accomplish just about that same impact through text and photos, but not with a stock photo, not with kind of a boilerplate sentence or two. Don't be afraid to tell a personal story here on the thank you page, just to kind of kickstart the sense of the impact that the donor is making. Other things you can do, social media buttons, sending an honor card if you gave an honor of someone, tons of things you can do, matching gifts, volunteer opportunities. Choose a couple things, I guess, is my advice. Don't just load it up with everything you can possibly think of. Choose a couple of things that are kind of important to you. If you're active on social media and those channels have a lot of content going on frequently, that might be good. If you have a robust volunteer calendar that you want people to know about, I would definitely put that on there if you are an organization that really kind of relies on volunteers. I really like what United Way here does. Not only do they have the social media buttons, but it kind of encourages the donor to brag about their giving. So rather than just saying, check us out on Facebook or check us out on Twitter, what those buttons do is it'll open up a pre-written Facebook post or a tweet that comes from the donor that kind of brags about the fact that they're a supporter and kind of asks their followers to check out United Way. So that could be an interesting thing, kind of empower your donors to take a little bit of pride in being a supporter of you. Like I said before, don't load it up with a ton of things. All of these things on this page are good, but I have a sense that maybe it might be a little too much. The more you load up these pages, I think the less people will kind of click on them. It's kind of that toothpaste trance again, where a lot of choices just kind of paralyze people. But an annual report, a video, a blog post, sign up for the newsletter, check us out on social media, all of these things together make sense, but I would be just a little bit careful about how many things you put on that page, because I think it will reduce conversions there. So customize that page, and then go customize that automatic email that gets sent to donors right after they donate. No matter what you're using, you should be able to go in there and customize those things. And the same principles apply. Thank the donor, tell them the impact of the gift, tell them what's going to come next in the communications cadence, and then give them something to do similar to the confirmation page. Don't just duplicate your confirmation page, maybe say a different story or give the donor something different to do than is on the confirmation page, but make sure that you're not just sending a boring kind of scary receipt. To even take the word receipt out of this email. Sure, you want to put the tax information down at the bottom, but don't make it scary. Don't make it transactional. If I'm a first-time donor, this is the first thing I'm ever going to get from this nonprofit. So of course the retention rates are lower, right? Because it feels like something that you get from the pharmacy after you buy some groceries or something. It doesn't say thank you. It's kind of scary with the red letters. I don't know what's going on there. Don't send it as an attachment, because spam filters don't like that. I think there's a thank you buried in here somewhere, but it was too scary and my computer didn't like it. Again, don't make it look like something that gets printed off of a cash register. I like this one. This one's a little bit better. It looks like an actual email. Thanks for your generous gift. It's going to do these things. I think this is kind of a bare minimum. Definitely better than these sort of scary transactional things, but you can go a step further. Charity Water, they do a really good job of this. Even though it still kind of looks transactional to me, it does do some nice things in the bottom half. Thanks for your donation. It's going to do this, and this. It has these kinds of returns. So there's some nice thank yous, some nice impact statements there. And then it also gives the donor something to do, matching gift opportunities, visit us on social media. So again, you don't want people to just archive this email or print it and file it away. You want it to be interactive. Send them back to your website, send them to social media, have them fill out a survey, look for their employer to see if they can maybe match the gift. There's lots of things you can do on these pages, but pick one or two similar to the confirmation page. But don't just leave that donor hanging. Don't just let them feel like they can't interact with that email at all. This one's great. This is the same organization that had that thank you video that I showed you before. This is their automatic email. So honestly, you could almost print this and mail it in an envelope, and it would probably just be as good as whatever thank you letter you would normally send out. Maybe take out the social media buttons, that'd be a little weird, but there's a nice photo that shows the impact of the work, a real photo, not just a stock photo. Thank you for investing in us. Your gift is going to do this, this, and this. There's going to be multiple impact statements. It gives the donor something to do. Check us out on social media. And it tells the donor what's going to come next. Hey, we're going to send you a tax letter in the mail next month. So be on the lookout for that. So this one actually does, I think, everything from that research study I showed you. Thanks to donor, thanks them quickly. Because again, this is an automatic email. It comes, 2 nanoseconds after they donate. Tells them the impact, shows that the organization is effective, tells the donor what comes next so they can expect it. It basically does everything from that research study. So steal this one, they won't mind. They probably don't even know that you did it, but I think this is a really good template for you. Here's another one, nice photos of service recipients. You brought justice, you're making all the difference in the world. We think you're a justice superhero. We're going to send you a thank you letter in the mail, again, telling the donor what comes next in the communications cadence. And we're going to keep you posted about all the great things that your donation does throughout the year. So again, kind of previewing that stewardship. So go in and customize these things. I think no matter what you're using, you should be able to do that. Look to these two specifically. I think they all have really nice elements, especially that service recipient photo, I think is really key, because it'll just kind of bridge that gap between what the organization is actually doing versus not being able to see that in person because it was just an online gift. Another example, these things don't have to be super flashy. What I really like about this email is there's a nice invitation from the ED, Ben. If you ever have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. Here's my email address. The email actually comes from that email address, so you can literally hit reply and it'll go right back to Ben. Check that, just reply to this email, and I'd love to hear from you. So a nice invitation, I think you could put in these emails. You won't get a ton of replies. You probably only, less than 10%, I would imagine, people are replying. But the people who do reply and ask you questions, those are some engaged people that you might want to pay attention to later on. The subject line I would pay attention to, maybe get rid of confirmation and receipt in favor of something that maybe shows the impact a little bit more. You just changed a life, you just saved the dolphins, whatever it is you do, get them thinking about that impact. Make sure that they actually can reply to that email, especially if you invite them to do so, which I think you should. Maybe have it come from Stephen at, or Ben at, or Abby at, whoever that leadership in the organization is, or whoever's in charge of fundraising. Make it actually come from a real person and have a signature at the bottom, rather than it just coming from your logo or a robot or your donor database or whatever. That should be a tweak that you can make in the settings to specify someone's email address. And don't worry about getting a ton of replies. Like I said, I don't think you will. I don't think anyone will abuse that email address by any means. But if you do use a real email address, make sure it's something that the inbox can be checked, so that if you do get replies, you can actually respond to those for sure. Okay, so now it's really time to look at how your database is going to help you here. So you're getting all these donations, you're getting them from different sources, online, offline, maybe on Giving Tuesday, on New Year's Eve, maybe if you have an event in November or December. How are we going to actually segment these people? Well, the first job is to do the segmentation. I think the biggest mistake folks make in January, February is we're sending the same thank you letter to everyone who gave at year end, regardless of were they a new donor or were they a repeat donor. How much did they give? What channel did they come from? Was it online? Was it offline? Was it Giving Tuesday? Was it peer-to-peer? Was it an event? Did they give one time, or did they start a monthly commitment? All of those things should factor into how you acknowledge that gift. Don't just send the same thank you letter in January to every single one of your donors. Look at ways to maybe communicate to people differently based on how they entered into your database. And no matter what database you're using, it's a Bloomerang or Razor's Edge or even Excel, I think, it might be a little harder to do this in Excel, but it's possible, I suppose. Segment these people, put them into lists in your database, and communicate to them differently. How you communicate to a first-time donor who gave to you at year end should be different than someone who maybe was a monthly donor throughout 2019 and gave to you in the year-end season, maybe on Giving Tuesday or in the last week of the year. Those communications should look different, not just the acknowledgement, but how you communicate to them throughout 2020, how you ask them for money, how you steward them, how you tell them stories. And they're not going to be wildly different. You don't need to, completely reinvent the wheel. But if all you do is simply acknowledge and tell the donor what kind of donor they are in those communications, you're going to be way ahead of most nonprofits who are just kind of sending the same thing to everyone. Hey, Stephen, thanks for becoming a donor to us. It was your first gift, I noticed. Wow, we're so welcome to have you join the family. Thanks so much for giving during the year-end season. I know you probably had a lot of choices in terms of your charitable giving. We're so happy you chose us. We can't wait to learn more about you over the next year or so. Versus someone who was a monthly donor and maybe they gave a 13th gift to you on Giving Tuesday. Hey, Abby, wow, you're a monthly donor, but we noticed that you gave to us on Giving Tuesday above and beyond your monthly commitment. Wow, thanks so much. That's really awesome. We can't wait to tell you about all the great things that you made possible in 2019. So not wildly different, right? You're basically just kind of acknowledging the channel or the frequency or maybe even the gift amount if that's appropriate. That really is the secret sauce to segmentation, rather than just sending that one same templated thank you letter to everyone, because it's probably not going to, necessarily hit the mark or make that donor really feel special, especially if they did something that truly was special, like give a 13th gift above and beyond their monthly commitment or become a new donor. I'd really focus on those people as well. So some segmentation ideas for you. If you do nothing else, I would have a letter ready to go in January that is specific to new donors, first-time donors, and a second letter that is specific to repeat donors, people that have been giving to you multiple times. It's their second gift, it's their 10th gift, it's their 20th gift. This is a bare minimum, but you can go way deeper here. You can slice that by gift amount. Maybe you have 4 letters instead of 2. You have 2 new donor letters. Maybe one says something in regards to the gift amount, or says something different if maybe it's a little bit lower gift amount. You could even have a third set of letters for monthly donors. I think monthly donors deserve to maybe have a little bit different communication to them. At least it acknowledges that they're a monthly donor, since that sends a big trust signal. They're giving you their credit card and trusting you to charge that every single month. But not only the acknowledgement, but what you ask that donor to do next, I think can look different in these letters. A new donor, you might want to invite them in for a tour in that thank you letter, versus maybe a longtime donor who probably doesn't need to come in for a tour because they've already done so, they really know a lot about you. Or maybe asking a donor to become a volunteer versus someone that, again, is already kind of plugged in and involved. So not only can the kind of the context of your thanking be different, but what you ask them to do next can also look different in those versions of the letters. And again, not wildly different, but you may want to tell a different story to a long-time donor than you do a first-time donor, for sure. And on the first-time donor side, get to know them. I think that's why the tour invitation makes a lot of sense, because you're going to get them on site, you're going to talk to them, you're going to have small talk, maybe more than small talk, and you're going to get to know that person, and that will guide your efforts. Surveys are also really great for first-time donors. Again, to kind of figure out what makes them tick, why they donated to you, why they care about what you do, what they expect out of you. Have a plan, at least for first-time donors here coming up in January. Know what it is you're going to send them over that course of that first year. And don't be afraid to ask for money from those new donors, quickly. It's someone who gives to you in December, their first gift. I think it's okay to ask them to give again, maybe in February or March, but only if you've done a really good job thanking them, telling them those stories, getting to know them. Maybe they've filled out a survey, maybe they've come in for a tour, come to an event, kind of use that information that you glean from those people to kind of guide your efforts for what that ask is. And again, the ask can be segmented too. Not all new donors should get the same ask. You might want to ask a $5 donor who gave to you on Giving Tuesday to join your monthly giving program. But maybe someone who gave you $100 or $200, you might ask them for a modest upgrade or maybe a gift of a similar amount, rather than pushing them into monthly giving per se. So kind of look at that gift amount and let that guide your efforts for what it is you're asking for them specifically. Again, the more you do this, the more sort of segmented and personalized and contextualized, I think contextualized is really the key word, these communications are. I think the higher the response rate they'll be. And, I've mentioned a lot segmenting by gift amount, but there are some organizations who don't really care about gift amount. I mean, they care, but they don't necessarily discriminate the outreach based on gift amounts. Now, if you have a high gift volume and you can't send a nice handwritten note or make a phone call to every single donor, like, I totally get that. You might want to segment by gift amount because a lot of common sense comes into play there. But if you don't have a high gift volume and you can get that stewardship stuff out the door, maybe consider not caring about gift amount, because I think a $5 donor should be thanked just as well as a $500 donor for sure. And most new donors don't give at capacity. So that's where things maybe like wealth screening come in, where you may not necessarily judge that donor by that gift amount, because it's not necessarily a signal of capacity. It's merely a signal of engagement or affinity right now, and that doesn't mean that that affinity can't change over the next course of the relationship. Other data for you that speaks to the speed of the gift acknowledgement, a lot of data that backs up the data I showed you previously. The faster you can thank a donor, the better. So I really would make sure that that first week of January, if you can, is devoted to thanking, especially focusing on new donors who gave to you in the year-end season. Even if you can get a gift acknowledgement out the door 24 hours, 48 hours, that's kind of the secret window that a lot of research has found. And board members, Penelope Burke found that board members are really good people to thank brand new donors. So a personal thank you, that's a handwritten note, that's a phone call, even a personal one-to-one email I would consider to be personal. What I'm not talking about is a mass email, a templated letter that every single person gets. I'm talking, you spend a little bit of time. And the best place to spend time is on the new donor side, honestly, because the retention rates are so low. You don't want to have that negative ROI. You want to get that second gift. So my advice for you, early January, segment your database, look at your year-end givers, and start with the new donors for sure. And then, the second group, I would say those kind of long-term loyal donors, you want to make sure they don't go ignored either. And then another interesting research point that came from Jen Shang, she did an awesome research study earlier this year on gift acknowledgements specifically. And she found that if you prime the pump with a thank you letter prior to an appeal, that appeal is about 60% more effective. Now, it might be a little bit too late for you folks to do that, but I think there are ways you can do that beyond just direct mail. So Giving Tuesday, for example, Giving Tuesday is in a couple weeks. We're recording this on the 14th. This week or next week might be a good time to send a thank you email to the people that you're planning on sending an appeal email to on Giving Tuesday. Straight up thank you, doesn't have any strings attached. Hey, we just want to thank you for being a donor this year. You've done all these great things. I think if you prime the pump with that nice acknowledgement, kind of apropos of nothing, it will make the appeal that comes a couple weeks later more effective. At least that's what this research study says. So that may be something you want to try out rather than just kind of bombarding people with appeals out of nowhere on Giving Tuesday. So one last bit of advice for you is make sure your data is clean. You're probably going to be doing a lot of data entry over the next 45 days or so. And the more consistent, the cleaner that data is, the more effective your acknowledgement operations or communications are going to be in 2020. So if you don't have kind of a standard format for how you're going to enter data, or maybe you don't have like a policies and procedures document for your staff, you might want to consider maybe looking for a template. There's a great template on the Bloomerang site that you can grab just to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. We're all kind of entering data in the same way. Because if you kind of buy what I'm selling about segmentation, you're going to need good, clean data to have reliable segments and reports and lists to do the kind of communications I'm recommending. Also would recommend that you invest in services that will proactively clean your database. I don't sell any of these things. I have no horse in the race, but my customers that invest in these things are way more successful than the ones who don't. So you might have already done an NCOA here this year, running up into your big mail campaigns that have gone out. So this will clean your database and update your addresses. It'll flag bad addresses or people who have moved. It's just going to help your deliverability rates for direct mail. Don't sleep on disease suppression. Disease suppression is kind of a depressing one. This will tell you if anyone in your database has passed away. It's definitely worth the money. It will reduce your mailing costs because you're no longer going to be delivering mail to people who have passed away. You're not going to be delivering mail to household members who maybe a partner or a spouse or a daughter or a son has passed away and making them feel really bad about that. That's pretty much a guarantee that they're not going to respond to your appeal. And things like email addresses, phone numbers, those data points can also be cleaned in your database. So It might be a little too late to do that for year end now, especially if you've already sent out that direct mail, but it's, there's never a bad time to do it either. I would do it multiple times a year if you can, because it's just going to help those deliverability rates, especially if you're doing a high volume of mail. So look into those things. There's tons of providers here in the States that can do those things, and they all run pretty similar in terms of price. But once a year at a minimum, I would be doing an NCOA and a disease suppression. But if you can do it quarterly, maybe even twice a year, maybe even monthly if you can, I think it'll definitely pay dividends for you. We had a customer that did a disease suppression, and they sent condolence notes to the people, to surviving household members that they had found that had someone pass away. And they got a really good response rate from people continuing to give. They even had one husband write back and say that they had no idea that the wife in the household had even been giving to that charity. So he kept the gift going on. So it can actually be a really good stewardship opportunity if you invest in those things. So wrapping up, retention, make sure you have that plan for retaining these year-end donors. Do a lot of work getting the donations for sure, reduce the friction online, especially coming up on Giving Tuesday and New Year's Eve. Those are the big days for gifts. Humanize anything that's automated to donors in terms of the communication. Honestly, donate to yourself today, right when you get off this call. Look at that confirmation page, look at that automatic receipt, and then start to segment your data. This is really where the database becomes a powerful tool, where you can create different lists of donors based on recency, frequency, channel of giving. Reason for giving is a really powerful one, because you may have two donors that basically look the same on paper, same channel, same gift amount, same day of giving, but their reasons for giving much different. And you want to get that information from them, send them a survey, call them up, say thank you, have a quick conversation. That's a really good way to segment your data, is the reason for giving. And then, tell those stories. And I know I showed you like 50 research studies that all basically say the same thing, but donors want to know how their gift is being used. So continuously tell them that in 2020. You really can't tell them too many impact stories. Put it in the monthly newsletter, send them emails out of the blue, just saying, hey, this is somebody that just went through our program because of donors like you, they got the help they needed, just wanted to say thanks. Those sort of out of the blue, for no reason, impact stories that aren't tied to an ask and aren't necessarily tied to a recent transaction, those things are really magical, and they're going to make the donor feel like they're doing a lot of good out in the world. So I think, Abby, we left time for questions, but if you're interested in Bloomerang, check us out. We're donor management software. You can watch a quick video demo if you want to see what we're all about. There's lots of free resources on our website. We got tons of templates and ebooks that talk about all the things we talked about today over the next hour or so. All the research I referenced, you can find there on our resources page. I've got my own webinar series. It's actually every Thursday, so we've got a session this afternoon in just a couple hours, so check that out. Love to see you on another webinar. You don't have to listen to me for more than just a couple of minutes introducing the guests, so if you're sick of me, I understand. And like I said, a lot of ebooks too. I've got a really good ebook that specifically talks about how to humanize those automated things that I just spent a couple minutes on, a few slides on. Way more examples, way more templates and things like that. So just go to our resources page and click on guides, and you'll find that one for sure. There's not too many on there. You'll see it. So Abby, we got time for questions. I'm not sure if there are already some questions that have come in, but I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes if you are.
Awesome. Yeah, I do have, okay, first off, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. So at the beginning, I think I did something wrong with my new headset. So you guys didn't get to hear all the cool things I said about Steven, but now you don't have to take my word for it. You know how great he is. I do have a couple of questions, and one of them actually has come up a few times for other webinars
Mm,
or other webinar presenters, and I've never gotten a good answer. Um,
okay, I'm up to the
I
challenge.
wanted I wanted to get your thoughts on whether or not including information about the tax deductibility of a donation has an influence either on donor acquisition or donor retention. What do you think?
So I haven't seen any hard data or research, but my gut says that you should still say it, honestly. I
Okay.
know we just had a big tax law change and people are doing less itemization, all that stuff, that's out there. But I would still mention it. I mean, we're only talking about, a couple words in a sentence, but what I would recommend, or I guess not recommend, is that you don't make that the number one reason to give, right? You should have a really nice, clear case for support, maybe end the appeal with tax deductible, but I wouldn't lead with that necessarily because so many people are not itemizing their returns. And even before that, it wasn't really the reason why people gave. Like there wasn't really any research that says that tax deductibility was a top reason. The top reasons are I want to make a difference. I believe in this cause, I believe in this organization. So lead with that. But I wouldn't remove the word tax deductible necessarily, just
Okay.
because the tax law changed. Yeah.
For sure. I know that tax law threw off a lot of people, so
Yeah.
I'm glad to have a good answer for that question. And another question that we got is, so you mentioned needing to emphasize like having good processes to get clean data, but for
Yeah.
someone who maybe what does clean data kind of mean
Well,
in
I
this
think it's
instance?
just kind of a standard format. Like, are you going to write out street or are you going to say ST period, right? Are
Okay.
you going to do, most of the time it boils down to address format to be sure. But other things like, consistent, maybe custom fields in your database. Are you putting all of your notes in the same place for each constituent? Or are you maybe filling out duplicate fields that all say kind of the same thing? So I would encourage you to go to the Bloomerang website, click on the resources page, and click on templates. And we've got a really awesome template for data entry policies and procedures. And it's product agnostic. If you don't use Bloomerang, that's fine. It'll still be really useful for you. If you use eTapestry or Donor Perfect or Razor's Edge or whatever, you'll still be able to use that thing. And basically all you have to do is go through it and maybe change the organization name where it appears and maybe apply some of the things that you're already doing now. But that will really help you. And you can put that in the hands of anyone who enters data into your system just to make sure everyone's doing it consistently and in the same way. Because our experience at Bloomerang is the people in charge of the database tend to turn over, pretty frequently within 1 to 2 years. So every new person that inherits the database, if they have their own different style or way of doing things, that's when you're really going to get into trouble and have difficulty pulling those lists or creating those segments and getting your mail delivered, honestly, especially with those address formats. So
Okay.
definitely check out that policies and procedures templates and download it and customize it and make sure everyone in the organization gets that. And if you're a one person shop, you're set because you're the only person that needs to follow it.
um, I will make sure to include a link to that then in the follow-up email we send out.
Cool.
So everyone keep your eye out for that follow-up email. I have one more question, and I
Okay.
wanted to see. So you mentioned a few slides ago that if you maybe got a donation in the year-end period, maybe it's okay to ask for another donation in February or March. Do you have
Yes.
any best practices or guidelines that we can use to decide how frequently we should send appeals to our donors?
So I look at this plan. I really like this one. So if you ask for a gift in that first 90 days, which really is the honeymoon period, um, don't do that unless you've done a good job prior to those 90 days thanking the donor, telling them stories, making them feel good about what they did, getting to know them a little bit, and then you're okay to ask for that gift in the first 90 days. Beyond that, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer, but I have heard that, I've heard this from a lot of different people at conferences. I've seen this in webinars and presentations that in general, nonprofits don't ask often enough, right?
Mm.
So however much you're asking is probably not the maximum amount that your donors should be asked. But don't just overload them with really boring, unpersonalized appeals that have nothing to do with why they gave or what kind of donor they are or what they've done in the past or things they've told you about themselves in the past. If you don't contextualize those asks with that kind of information, it doesn't matter how often you ask donors because they're not going to respond to your appeals. So my first advice would be, rather than finding that sweet spot for quantity, first look at the quality of the appeals, especially if you do segmentation, because that's really going to improve the quality. And then once you've nailed that down, then start to look at, okay, can we ask a couple more times? Can we increase the volume? Can we increase the volume? But if you do that part first, you're probably not going to be successful because you're basically just sending the same kind of boring appeal to everyone, and it's not going to hit the mark. So my advice would be get the acknowledgement process really nailed down, get a mechanism together for getting to know the donors so that you can contextualize those asks going forward, then kind of worry about the volume.
Perfect. That is really helpful, and hopefully you guys will be able to take that back to your teams as you're planning for 2020. I know it is past noon. I know people are sticking with us, and I really appreciate you all giving us your time. I know your time is valuable, and you are very busy, particularly this time of year. So thank you for sticking with us. Stephen, thank you for all this awesome information. Everyone, I will send you a follow-up email probably this afternoon containing links to this webinar recording and that policies and procedures template that Stephen mentioned and a few other resources. So keep an eye out for that. And I hope now you feel a little more confident as you head back to your teams and plan for the rest of this year and the beginning of next year. So, Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Sure, no problem, anytime.
All right, I will talk to everyone in 2020. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a good day.
See ya.